For a long time, I dreamed about the band. There was a need for closure.
It seems like only 5 minutes ago that we were pushing a broken van back through the streets of London after a gig we played to no one. Tonight we play out the fantasy of millions.
I get asked to do a session, and the other musicians are a drummer named Stuart Copeland and a bass player who calls himself Sting. Within short order, the Police, as the world knows the band, is born. Sting, or I, suggest that maybe we try out his new song.
Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light.
We have a great song. They think we're a punk band, and we don't destroy officers or insult people. Well, not to their faces anyway.
I want my MTV!
I begin photographing everything around me. Sting is fast becoming a media darling.
Should we film me whooping Sting?
That would be good, wouldn't it?
Instead of rejoicing in the unbelievable success we've created together, the studio feels more like a canvas for dirty fighting. Each one of us battling for his own territory. Each one of us wants his instrument slightly louder than the other. We finish up the album, Ghost in the Machine, and that's about what I feel like, a ghost. It feels like Sting has already broken away.
I'm quitting first. I'd just like to introduce the band. Andy, this is Stuart. I remember you. We're going to go on tour.
This is the biggest gig of our lives. Life doesn't end here. Now, it is forever. Hello.
Hey,
Nice to
Andy.
see you.
It's, good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
You know, this documentary, which begins, the opening shots are fascinating because it begins with you at home in Los Angeles, right around the time of the announcement of the Police reunion tour.
Right.
And one thing I want to ask you, there's a very early shot of you playing guitar while your coffee brews.
Yeah.
Is that a typical thing? Do
I
you
tried
get
to
up
get that
and
taken
play?
out.
What's that?
Well, yeah, no, I asked them to take that out, but it's still there. Well, they wanted, seeing to me at home, like, sort of thinking about pre-tour, like actually there's a domestic life, then you're going to go into complete rock and roll chaos. So I guess they wanted that contrast. But yeah, there you go. I mean, it's all typical.
Well, it's a lovely film, and it's interesting because it brings together your life story, the story of the band, and also your career as a photographer.
Yeah.
You have 3 books of photography, some 12 solo albums, I believe. I don't think that includes the 2 albums with Robert Fripp. It's a long career that also includes, if I have read Wikipedia right, an instrumental on the opening or closing credits of Weekend at Bernie's.
Yes, I did that too.
And
Down Out in Beverly Hills, which went straight to #1. First film score I ever did. It was kind of cool.
But a lot of the movie proceeds from your autobiography, One Train Later.
Right. The film is based on the book, but it's not the book. I mean, the book is really sort of a different entity. And that's something that I had to grapple with, because of course I'm very attached to my absolutely brilliant prose. Had to let go of that, and then you make a film. You cannot photograph every page of the book. You just can't do it. And so that was an interesting learning curve for me.
There's a lot of narration, some of which is directly from the book?
Some of it is, but, and I didn't really get this at the beginning, because it's my voiceover all the way through the film, that, sometimes if I read, the very exacting prose, the paragraphs in the book, it didn't always sound that good in terms of a voiceover on a movie. And so it was a sort of trick of saying sort of whatever was written in the book, but saying it in a much more conversational style, which actually translated better to film. And I had to sort of learn that as we went along.
The earliest parts of this concern your life story growing up in England, and you were born almost literally on the road, foreshadowing a career as a rock and roll musician in a gypsy caravan. Can you explain what that is and how and why that came to be?
Yeah. So you've done your research. This is very good. Yes, I was actually born in a field because my father was stationed in the north of England in the RAF, and housing was in short supply, and he had this rather romantic idea. I don't know, maybe that's where I got it from. He bought this beautiful gypsy caravan, and in fact I was born in it, believe it or not. That's actually a true story. I mean, it sounds like you're fabricating this very romantic beginning to your life, but my mother would tell me, in fact, I mean, this just all sounds so ridiculous. I was born in a gypsy caravan.
And a gypsy caravan is sort of like a mobile home.
Well, yes, but it's beautiful. It's painted, it's wooden. I mean, this is archaic stuff. You know, it's almost like the equivalent of, you know, the wagons that went west in this country. I mean, we're really talking about, it's pretty funky. But I was born in this thing, and my mother told me that, you know, the actual gypsy encampment was the next field over, and the queen of the gypsies came over and sort of blessed me and gave my mother some silver and a piece of linen. That's ludicrous, isn't it? But actually, you know, this is actually true, you know. I'm 183 years old. Yeah.
So you got your first guitar at 11, and your professional career starts as a teenager.
11 and a half. Yeah. Yes, very shortly after that, I started playing. You know, I was in a sort of rural town in England, but I started to play in these little dance bands. You know, by the time I was about 14. Yeah.
And you moved to London at 19.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to me. I saw your final concert with the Police, Madison Square Garden, 2008, August. You played some covers of songs by Cream and Jimi Hendrix.
That's right, we did, yeah.
And you played alongside these guys. When you're in London as a teenager, you're playing on bills with them. You knew Clapton, you knew Hendrix.
Yeah. Eric and I were actually very good friends at that point. We were always playing at a club called the Flamingo, where basically everyone in bands in London played there. We all sort of channeled ourselves through this one club, and they do all-nighters, literally turning up at 11 and playing till 6 the next morning. And often I was on with Eric. He was in John Mayall's Blues Breakers, and you know, we knew each other then. We were sort of in the small guitar club that existed in London, as was Jeff Beck, Albert Lee, Peter Green. I mean, that's where I come from. That's the school. That's where I started out with all these you know, since now legendary British guitarists. That was definitely where I was, you know. Eventually, Eric got my Les Paul. He bought it off me, and he recorded Fresh Cream with it, which is a sort of interesting little rock historical fact that not a lot of people know, but it's actually true. And, then Hendrix, of course, turned up in London, and there's a few apocryphal stories about me and him, but I was in a band that was also managed by the same manager, so I was very much on the first small circle of people that he got to know in London at that time. And, you know, he arrived on the scene in London, and it was this incredible thing. No one had seen anything like it. The first time I saw Jimi Hendrix, I walked into, I think it was a club called the Blazers, and I walked in, and he was playing, you know, he just arrived, and he was playing with the Brian Auger Trio. And he had this afro out to about here. He had a white buckskin suit on and a white Stratocaster in his mouth, and he was playing. No one had seen anything like it, so it was quite phenomenal. And then, of course, the word spread, and he basically took over the world. Yeah.
I want to flash forward. You know, you moved to Los Angeles, and you played with Eric Burdon and the Animals there.
Yeah.
And then you spent some 6 years after that. Tell us a little bit about that time just before the start of the Police.
Well, I arrived in Los Angeles, you know, and I was with the Animals, and you know, and I was having a great time. And then Eric broke up the band. He wanted to become a film director, don't we all, love? And so that was the end of that. But somehow I didn't want to go back to England, and I just stayed on. But you know, I gradually became really sort of down and out, and was hanging by a thread for the next few years. And I actually went to college in Los Angeles and studied music. And I think I taught guitar. I somehow scraped by, through those years. It was, for me, it was like the years, literally in the desert, the lost years, before I studied music intensively, practiced classical guitar like hours and hours a day. And that's what I did. I just took time out. I felt like at that point I played in bands, I'd been on the road, I'd done a lot of that, and I just wanted out. But I didn't go out for music. I studied it more intensively. Then, of course, I went back to London.
Now, what exactly are you thinking, studying classical guitar? Is there a lot of call for that?
No, it's a desperate existence. Very hard to be a classical guitarist.
But did you think that's what you might do?
I did. I certainly had very serious ambitions at it. Until I realized, at some point I realized there's no career, there's no life here. This is extremely difficult. There's very small handful of people in the world who make a living doing this. And it's true today as it always was then, because I live in LA, I'm very good friends with the Los Angeles Quartet. I know a lot of that scene there. And I see these kids come up with great ambitions. It's like studying philosophy. Get a job as well, really, it's true. But, the thing about it is that, I studied music for all that time, very deeply, played, guitar endlessly. And when I came out of it, of course, I was a much improved musician. So it was a great backbone for me.
So you move back to England, and almost through happenstance, you meet Sting and Stewart, and the Police begin to come together.
Yeah.
And then it seems like things happen relatively quickly.
Well, I think we were together really about a year before it really broke. In fact, I haven't got time to go through the whole story, but we were desperately hanging on. We released Roxanne, nothing. We released Can't Stand Losing You a little bit, but nothing much. Then we did this tour of the East Coast here. We opened at CBGB's and did a tour up the East Coast, which really put us together as a band. And A&M in America signed us. So this was a major thing. We were extremely happy about that. We went back to England, and Roxanne became a big hit here, and the album went into the top 20. So then A&M in the UK, oh my God, and they started all over again. They re-released all the records 1 year later. So it was like we'd had a year to practice being the Police before it hit, and then we released it again in the UK. Everything went to number one, and we were off and running.
You break in the UK, and then you come back to the US, and this is always, as someone who's written about music, it's always something you read about, that moment that the Police come back, get in a van, and tour the entire United States. And you refer to it in the movie as feeling like you're climbing a mountain with your fingernails.
Yeah, well, exactly. No, it was very difficult because, back at that time, of course, there wasn't even MTV. There was no internet. It was literally driving in a van, driving ourselves right across the country, doing gig after gig after gig, interview after interview after interview, turning up, trying to do everything we could to promote the band. And the mantra was, you must break in the US first. If you get the US, you'll get the rest of the world before the UK or anything else. And we had the music, and we worked incredibly hard. We did thousands of gigs and slowly worked our way up. Each time we came back, the vehicles we traveled in got slightly larger. The clubs got better, and we slowly worked up until, when we got the third album out, Zenyatta Mondata, it really broke, and, off we went.
And as you begin to record these records, and this is a well-known story now, but almost from the start of that third record, as things are breaking, you're becoming bigger and bigger, there are those tensions that begin to pull the band apart.
Yeah, well, there's always tensions in a band. A good band, I think. I think it's just part of the deal. You need a very strong, sparky chemistry. If it's going to be a rock band, you don't want three mellow guys, really, do you? You might as well do folk music. Actually, maybe I will do folk music. Think about that. But, we're always sort of three disparate personalities, but we played well together. There was definitely something there. Well, I don't have to even say that. But at the beginning, you have this very strong camaraderie where it's the three of us fighting the world, and we had nothing. We were hanging by a thread, literally no money, nothing. no food, no shoes. It was very difficult. But we kept fighting on, and
then you have the world and end up fighting each other in some ways.
Yeah, then you start to get big time, and you'll start becoming real rock stars, and it's like the oil starts separating out from the water, and it's difficult to recreate that innocence and the power of the early days. But it doesn't mean we can't play. We were still going out and playing relentlessly all the time, but you feel it's getting harder to do it.
3 disparate personalities. How would you describe those personalities?
2 assholes and 1 really great guy.
You say that jokingly, but there's a scene in the movie where you're talking to Martha Quinn, and Stewart and Sting begin play fighting, and you're left sitting at the table almost like you're left holding the bag. It's a very striking moment.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, we do get characterized as being like 3 guys who just hate each other all the time. It's really not true. Actually, I got a very nice email from Sting this morning. God bless you, go for it with the movie. So you see, and I saw Stuart last week, we had a very nice meeting. So it's not actually that true. The thing about our band is there are only 3 of us in it, and when it really comes down to it, we stick up for one another. We stand back to back, and we always have done. In the real being together as a band and trying to work out songs and all that, there's tension, but, so what? We usually end up, somehow it worked. I mean, hello, Did it work or not? Yes, I think so.
Photography emerges as something of a refuge for you.
Yes, good way to put it, yeah.
Are you still shooting now?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. No, and of course I've gone on way since this period. I mean, at this point, I was actually in New York, and I went down to B&H Photo, and I bought a camera, Nikon, I think. And, we were surrounded by photographers, and I just sort of had this formal notion, well, okay, now I'm going to study photography, I'm going to get a really good camera and start going for it. And I did. But, I took to it immediately. It wasn't hard for me. I mean, I started to get it fast, and then just to shoot everything around me all the time, just because I enjoyed it. And I think a couple of years into it, I realized, actually, maybe I'm documenting this. And so really, towards the end, I felt like I was doing 2 jobs, absolutely full on, photographing all the time and then playing as well. Got a bit much, but it was also, you used the word refuge, which is nice. It was a refuge, and it was also a way of having sort of autonomy. So I could do something like an art form on my own, outside of having to fight it out with 2 other guys. So, and I just loved it anyway. I loved black and white photography, and I think I was inspired by all the incredible European art films I saw as a kid. That was a big spur to me. And, I'm still doing it today. I've done I did 4 shows last year. I'm working on another book. So, it continues on as a very definite part of my life.
And of course, it becomes, as you say, something you can control, very much your viewpoint in the midst of having to balance other viewpoints in the band.
Yeah, it was the one place where it was me and the camera and what I did with it. No one interfered with me, luckily. So I wouldn't say it was a perverse enjoyment. I loved it with purity. And there's not much left of that in the world, is there? Yeah.
In 2007... the band comes back together. You go back on the road. What are the feelings, not just when you first step on stage, but as your command of that material comes back?
Well, apart from utter revulsion. Yeah, no, it was, of course it was a thrilling thing. We're going to go and do it again. But it's not as straightforward as that, because I think there was a certain amount of fear in it, probably. Oh, God. Are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to be able to get along? Are we going to be able to pull this off? Not musically. I felt stronger than ever. The thing is, all 3 of us had continued playing for years. I'd never stopped touring, basically, nor did certainly Sting didn't. And I played with Stuart a few times, so it was there. It wasn't the music. It's more like, are we going to be able to hang together and really do this? And then I think the other fear was like, what if this is a complete delusion? We think that, the police getting back together is going to be a big deal. And we didn't really know until day one. And I think it was in New York. The tickets went on sale, and, everything sold out in about 2 hours flat. It's like a big sigh of relief. They had all these, like, stadium penciled in, but nothing inked in. And the first one went down, then the next one, and then off we went, and it was kind of thrilling, actually.
We've got time for some questions from the audience in the front, and then I'll come to you in a few rows back. Yes, in the stripes, you in the front. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem. Hi. So you, as a rock star and a photographer, do you prefer being in front of the camera or behind it?
Oh, well, it's interesting, because now I'm let's say a photographer. I know a lot about it that I didn't used to know, but I get very difficult in front of cameras because I see what they're doing, and I go, I don't want you to use that lens. Get up, don't get below me. I get a little bit controlling. It's changed. So actually, I prefer to be behind the lens now. Honestly, he said in front of millions of cameras.
Yes.
Oh well.
Hi. Considering Stuart put out Does Everybody Stare a few years ago, is there a friendly competition between you guys with the documentary? Like, that was good, but watch what I can do.
Not really. I don't think there's any comparison, do you?
I'll find out, I suppose.
No, listen, Stuart, I went to support Stuart with his film, which I think is very charming and shows an incredible buzz and, that very sort of home movie quality that film was made. It was him shooting video only for the first 2 years. But there's something in that film that I haven't seen in any other film. It's right in the center of the band, and I think he really captured something. I think it was very, very successful as a piece of work. This is sort of it's kind of more professional. There's a lot more money in this film than in Stuart's. Actually, there's no competition. Stuart's very supportive of this. He really likes the film, so. They've both been very supportive of this.
It's also great to see a film like this where it seems like you have all the access to documentary footage you could want. You mention something and you see it instantaneously, and of course you've organized it that way. But it's so rich. It's a lot of great footage.
A big thing, to get all this archival footage. When you're trying to do a film like that, I had no idea the amount of work and the specialist kind of work you do on this to get it. Yeah. Incredible.
Yes, up front here. I'm sure there's one coming your way.
Hi, what is it like working with Hugh Padgham?
Hugh Padgham? Oh, that's an interesting question. Why would you ask me about Hugh Padgham? Do you know him?
I'm interested in music.
Okay. Well, Hugh was great,
He did produce your last 2 albums, right? And
he did 2 albums, yeah.
Also.
Well, we did first 3 albums with one guy that we started with, and that got to, it's a long story, but it came to a bit of an unfortunate ending with him, and then we moved over to Hugh Padgham, who had a good reputation then. But the truth is that the 3 of us were really the producers. I think Hugh was really the engineer, because we were very strong about the way we wanted everything to sound. And I actually used to feel sorry for him. He was a sort of well-spoken, quite... I don't know if introverted is the right word, but a sort of shy English guy, and they did these 3 monsters in the studio he was trying to control. But, he did a great job. But I don't think he directed us in the sense that a producer would take someone who needed help. We didn't need any help. We were very strong in what we were doing. So, and he wears size 10 shoes.
How do you feel about, because you've been around for a long time, you've seen a lot of changes.
I just got started, mate.
In the music industry. How do you feel about the internet's effect on music sharing and just the prominence of all of these bands that are now around that would have never really had an opportunity to show?
Yeah. I don't know. It's a sort of set of mixed feelings about where it's at now. It seems like at this moment music is free, which I have a bit of a problem with, And I feel sorry for people who are going out thinking that, back in the days of the Police, we have sold millions of records before we even got out of the studio, and it was incredible. But that's not happening for anyone anymore. I don't know if it's become a great leveler that everything is so available all the time now. I don't really hear much that thrills me. I sort of dip into it and out of it. I put out a rock album last year with a great singer from Los Angeles that I thought was a fantastic record. And I listened to a lot of different bands in that period because, seemed the right thing to do. So much of it to me, being the age I am and having been through so much, sounds like retreads. Guitar bands are still going, sort of. I'm not big on electronic EDM or whatever they call it. There's some bands I like, but it's mostly I like this track. I think that worked. It's rare to hear a whole thing. I could think of a few bands. I like the Grizzly Bears. They're from New York. That's pretty much an art rock band. I've always liked the Chili Peppers. I like Pearl Jam. I liked Nirvana and the grunge scene back in the day. It's sort of in and out, really. Generally, it seems pretty flat to me, not thrilling. Mostly it seems like I heard that one already.
Well, you did get to see Hendrix when he arrived in London, so it's a high bar. It is a high bar.
Yeah, it's not snobby. It's just, I've been doing this a long time and played so much music and thought about it and practiced it and recorded it that, some people, aren't you listening to it? I go, well, not really. It sort of did it, So, but I think it's great that people still want to be in bands and go out there and play and go on the road and all the rest. I think it seems to me that it's gotten much harder now to really sustain that life than it used to be.
I think we've got time for one more question. It's a rare opportunity, people.
Okay.
Come back to you in the front one more time.
Throw them out there.
Easier or harder question?
Let's go for the harder one first and see how that goes.
Okay.
And we'll be the judge of that.
I was just wondering, with Sting's humanitarian persona, was there ever a debate or controversy regarding Stuart Copeland's father's job? He was a founder of the CIA. Was that ever?
That's an interesting question.
I'm sorry.
Well, yeah.
Well, that was the harder question. Let's get the first slide.
No, we can debate that because, obviously we, in our particular band, we had this drummer, two English guys, American drummer, and the drummer had grown up in Lebanon, and his father, as far as I know, was one of the establishing figures of the CIA, which was like, whoa, that's pretty weird, and all this stuff, and, but I think the way it went
But did it make it easier at customs, or...?
There were times, actually, we played in Egypt, and the fact that Miles, who was also Stuart's brother, they had connections, and we couldn't get the gig set up, and Miles made a few calls, and we got the gig set up. Yeah, it was really true. But I think, what happened was that we were in the band, and we were becoming a thing, and then Stuart's father wrote this book, which revealed all this stuff about the CIA and all that, and Stuart was absolutely shocked by it. He didn't know it, and then it all came out in this book. I remember him, and I liked him, but where it went wrong in the end was that Stuart's father did, I think, an interview with the Rolling Stone and claimed that he had thought up the band, called it the police. He claimed everything. It was incredible. So out there that everyone was furious. I know Sting wrote a letter to Jan Wenner and tried to put that to bed. Yeah, a very bizarre moment.
That is a bit strange. Well, I think we're going to wrap it up here, but I'm sorry.
Sorry, I have one last question.
Oh, we do?
Where can people see the film?
Well, people can see the film. It's opening on Friday night at the Village East and also at the Empire, and I'll be doing a Q&A at the Village East on Friday night and at the Empire on Saturday night. Please be there.
There we go. Thank you very much for joining us. Andy, thank you.